Kei aku nui, kei aku rahi, nau mai ki te pai kōrero kia mata. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, brought to you by te Māngai, Pāho and Irirangi te motu, New Zealand on air. I tēnei hōtaka ka kōrero au ki te minita take ohanga, kia Nicola Willis. Well, tēnā koe te minita. Aotearoa, New Zealand is considered a young nation, but in the 180 or so years that we've been up and running, you are just the second woman to ever hold this role. Ruth Richardson was the first, you're the second. I guess, you know, when mums are balancing all the checkbooks at home and all those kinds of things, why is that? Are you curious as to why only 2 women have held this job?
Yeah, look, women are often the lead economic decision makers in their households and their businesses. But traditionally, women have been underrepresented in finance sectors and roles, and I think you've seen that in the finance minister position as well. It's still the case that when I go and meet with some boards or businesses, I stand out as one of the few women in the room, and if there's one thing I can achieve in this role, I hope it's showing other women that we deserve to be in these places.
In February this year, you also became the Minister for Economic Growth. With a new role, new website was launched, was a catchy phrase, going for growth. You committed to raising living standards, creating higher paying jobs and delivering vital infrastructure. Since then though, the economy has shrunk, unemployment is up, the lowest investor confidence since COVID. What do you put it down to? What's gone wrong?
Well, it's important to remember that in the first 3 months of this year, New Zealand did grow. In fact, we grew twice as fast as was being forecast and 3 times as fast as Australia. It is the case that we've had a difficult second quarter. New Zealand clearly has felt the brunt of global uncertainty, and we are still in a recovery from what has been a really difficult economic period. And what we see with economic recoveries is first you've got to get inflation under control, then interest rates come down, and only then, once firms are confident about investing again, does unemployment reduce. And so those are all of the things that we want to see and are working hard to achieve, and I retain confidence that we will see the economy continuing to grow this year.
Unlike other countries like Australia, they haven't seen the economy shrink. Do you have a time frame? You know, would you hazard a guess at when we might start to turn around?
Well, certainly the Reserve Bank and the Treasury are both continuing to forecast annual growth this year. They expect in the 3rd and 4th quarters of the year we will see a return to growth, and that's based on their observations of the economy. And while we underperformed Australia in the past 3 months, as I said, we outperformed them in the first 3 months. There is some volatility from quarter to quarter, and we can continue to expect that.
When we look at those 3 commitments in that strategy, the going for growth commitments, starting with the raising of the living standards, when you look at Māori medium income, in the first quarter it was $36,000, with food prices going up 5% in the last year, plus electricity 11%. The cost of living is really pinching some of those whānau, particularly those who are on around $36,600. What do you think the solution is to, just to help out families get kai on the table?
Yeah, look, I fully acknowledge that for many families, particularly those on limited incomes, this has been a really challenging period because the cost of living rose significantly when inflation was out of control for 2 or 3 years, and then prices haven't come back from there, but the rate of price increase has moderated and is less than it was. But for those who are on limited incomes, you know, the key thing that the government needs to do is, 1, ensure that we're not letting price rises get out of control by having a control of inflation, and the second is making sure that this is a growing economy where people have the opportunity to take on that next promotion, that next job, or their employer has the opportunity to pay them more for the work that they do. And those are absolutely the aspirations that we have for families, including Māori families in New Zealand.
And just reflecting on that second commitment, which is the higher paying jobs, when we look at the last quarter, we've seen thousands more jobs losses across the country. But you know, Māori work in construction, retail, manufacturing, which combined has lost around 27,000 jobs. And if you find yourself out of work, you know, at the moment, it lasts for longer. So I guess what's the plan to relieve some of that pressure on whānau?
Well, making sure that New Zealanders have good job opportunities is absolutely at the heart of our work to strengthen the economy, and we feel very deeply the loss of jobs that has been occurring in some of our communities. It is forecast that unemployment will reduce into the next year, and that's positive. It means more opportunities for many people. If you think about a sector like construction, it's a good example of what our economy's been through. When interest rates went very high in response to high inflation, that meant a lot of construction projects that people were going to borrow from the bank to deliver suddenly didn't stack up financially anymore, and those plans got put away. Well, in that sector, what can we do as a government? Well, the first thing is interest rates dropping significantly over the past year puts a bit of a tailwind behind more projects. But the second thing is making sure those projects can get consents. And so that's why our fast-track legislation to make sure that big projects can get consented faster is really important, because projects that would have taken years potentially can start in months.
Commentators suggest that you might have gone too hard too fast with a fiscal plan to cut the spending without consideration for the pipeline of kaimahi and workers. Do you take any responsibility for for the way that the construction has had significant job losses?
Well, the reality is that in each of our budgets we've invested many billions more into the infrastructure pipeline and into projects that require the construction workforce. So the government has maintained that commitment even while we've been in a time of trying to fix the holes in our books and get the deficit under control. We recognise that infrastructure development is really important for public service delivery, whether it's hospitals or schools, but is also important for sustaining growth, whether that's roads or ports. So we are committed to that investment.
So in the meantime, while we're waiting for these big projects to get underway, for whānau Māori who are working in construction and retail manufacturing, they are heading over to Oz. Almost everyone knows somebody, an uncle or a brother or a cousin that's had to go off and find jobs over there. 47,000 New Zealanders left for Oz last year. How are you going to lure them back?
Well, look, I feel that very deeply. In fact, one of the reasons that I wanted to come into politics is I believe that New Zealand is just an awesome country, but we're always going to be competing with the rest of the world. So we need to make this a place where people can live out their aspirations. And what we've seen historically is that when unemployment rises in New Zealand, we do lose more people to Australia. But then when it falls again and our economy grows, you see people coming back the other way. So that's another motivator for why we have to strengthen the economy, because Australia will always just be over the ditch.
That was one of your commitments in that growth strategy, is that to create higher paying jobs, but we're not seeing that. We're seeing that we're losing our people offshore to higher paying jobs.
Well, it is the case that we are going through a recovery, and not every change that we make will have an immediate impact. But what we need to do is put in place the foundations that will ensure in the medium term we are creating more jobs. And we are doing the things that employers and businesses tell us they need to see in order to hire people and pay them more. Whether that's making sure our tax settings are competitive, whether that's getting rid of some of the red tape that's been in their way, forging new trade agreements, accepting international investment, delivering infrastructure efficiently, making sure the science system works. We're making changes that are actually for the longer term and will deliver the foundations of a stronger economy.
So for a whānau who might be, for a young Māori person who's in the workforce who might be on $38,000 a year, when will they see some change?
Well, what the Treasury forecast is that they will see unemployment falling later this year, and so that will mean there are more job opportunities. They also forecast that wages will continue to grow faster than inflation over the next 4 years. They're forecasting 240,000 jobs will be created over the next 4 years. So that will create more choices for many people, and as incomes rise faster than prices, that will give more people the opportunity to get ahead. When I think about that young person, I also think about one of the common aspirations that we have in New Zealand, which is to own their own home. And the changes that the government is making to the way that we plan for housing, the way we fund for housing, the infrastructure that we deliver, means that we believe in future there will be more housing choices for people too.
Looking at Māori unemployment, because you mentioned unemployment there, but I specifically want to look at that number, and it's not this government or the last government. I believe it's probably successive because consistently Māori unemployment has been 1.5 to 2 times the national rate. Why do you think there's such inequity?
Well, it's one of those issues that I have looked into and thought about through the years. And look, there's a couple of things that come through. One is that traditionally Māori have been working disproportionately in sectors that are really affected by the ups and downs of the business cycle, whether that's construction, as you discussed earlier, or other parts of the agricultural industry. But I think the second issue is that we know that it is, when there's a downturn, it is young people and those with fewer skills and qualifications who are always the worst impacted. And Māori are a young population, and also we know we need to do a much better job for Māori of ensuring that they have the skills that they need for a range of employment choices when they leave school.
So if unemployment generally is 5.2, at the moment 5.1, 5.2 I think it is sitting around, any idea what the 15 to 24-year-old Māori unemployment rate is?
Well, I know that for Māori overall it's around 9.9%, and I would expect that it is much, much higher for young Māori.
21.4%, that's 4 times the general unemployment rate. You talk about these young people, but do you have a plan to turn the fortunes of rangatahi Māori around? Absolutely,
and one of the positive statistics at the moment is that many of those rangatahi Māori are choosing to enter further training and education during this period in which they're struggling to get work. And we are very supportive of that because we know the thing that gives people better choices in the future is if they've acquired more skills and qualifications. One of the reasons that we've moved back to the regional polytechnic model and industry training model is we know that people often learn best when they're in a community that is familiar to them, working with people that are familiar to them. But ultimately, what I want to see for all young people, including Māori young people, is that more of them leave school with the basic skills they need to access a range of jobs and further training opportunities. The stark factors right now are too many of our Kiwi kids are leaving school without even the basic literacy and numeracy skills they would need to enter an apprenticeship, and that holds many people back.
Does it bother you though, because 21.4% of rangatahi Māori between 15 and 24 are unemployed, and then there's the NEETs rates which showing that they're not in employment or education. So I'm interested in where they are studying, as you suggest, and what that might look like. But it's just the waste of human potential, I guess, in these young, bright Māori youth. In 10 years' time, they're going to be unemployed Māori men and women. So how do we turn that around?
Well, it really worries me because no one wants to see a young person who's eager and keen to have work to be missing out on that opportunity. But equally, I absolutely would not write off that group of young people and say that they'll still be in that position in 10 years. I'm far more optimistic for them. We know that they are able to access interest-free support to go to tertiary education, heavily subsidised by the taxpayer. They are able to access industry training, a range of different employment programs, and the government funds those because we want to ensure that even during a period of unemployment, that young people remain attached to their community, that they're getting social engagement, that they're upskilling for the future. And as our economy recovers, I fully expect that number of unemployed people to drop. And as I say, that's a driver for why we want to grow the economy at all, so that people have meaningful work.
We know that access to education has always been an issue with those lower socio-economic groups. So are there any specific programs that you have at the moment that are going around looking for those Pacifica and Māori youth to help them join those polytech courses that you're talking about? Because I don't see that.
Well, what MSD are doing, the Ministry for Social Development, is they have started a community coach model aimed particularly at supporting young people when they are unemployed. And the idea of that is to provide some direction and support to connect them with appropriate learning and training opportunities. And I would like to give a shout out to the whānau in particular, who have shown quite an innovative approach in reaching learners who might not have always succeeded in the school system, but who are eager to learn. And they are offering a range of programs which seem to be very popular, particularly with Māori. So there are these training opportunities out there, and many people are accessing them. We've seen quite a big increase in the number of people in tertiary education during this period in which unemployment's been rising.
On a positive note, the Māori economy has surpassed its self-set target of 100 billion by 2030, and a report this year showed the Māori economy was tracking at 126 billion in 2023. That's up 83% from 2018. What are the lessons you're taking away from Māori business leaders for the wider economy?
Well, first of all, I think that is a huge tribute to iwi leaders who have used their Treaty of Waitangi settlements incredibly wisely and have grown their capital for the benefit of their iwi members, but also for our wider communities and economy. Some extraordinary success stories in terms of Ngāi Tahu's investments, in terms of Waikato Tainui's investments, and they've grown that capital massively. The second thing that you see really clearly in those statistics about the growth of the Māori economy is the boom in Māori entrepreneurship. The number of Māori choosing to run their own business, start their own enterprise, has grown at a much faster rate than the population as a whole. And then the third thing is seeing the number of Māori who are choosing to employ other Māori New Zealanders, and that's become a source of growth as well. So when I look at the Māori economy, I see so many success stories, whether that's in our primary industries, whether that's in tourism, whether that's in our gaming sector, and I have every confidence that that will continue to be New Zealand's story. Tama Pōtaka has set a goal that he wants to see that Māori economy double again by 2035.
What do you think the uptake on, you mentioned entrepreneurship and the numbers, the boost there. What do you think it was before that was holding Māori back in those roles? Is it that they are being provided grants or loans through Māori iwi?
Well, look, it's hard for me to say. I don't have a diagnosis of why it is that suddenly Māori entrepreneurship has taken off. But what I would definitely observe is that New Zealanders as a culture often have pretty good ideas and are pretty innovative, and perhaps as people's confidence grows, they're more willing to take that risk of investing their own money in a business, stepping away from the safety and security of their own job. And certainly when people take that risk to start their own business, that's what can lead to much bigger things, and I'd love to see more of it happening.
How do you see the wider economy and the Māori economy integrating, or is the Māori economy something quite different?
They're so integrated because, you think about it, for example, Māori run farms, for example. Well, they won't just be employing Māori people, they'll be employing people from the local community. They won't just be spending their profits at Māori businesses, they'll be buying things from the local shops and the local stores. So when the Māori economy succeeds, the economy succeeds. And to me, it's that simple. But what you do see is that the distinctive accumulation of capital and the rising role of post-settlement entities has meant that I think there is a focus on long-term investments, intergenerational investments, sustainable business approaches. And I think that's been really healthy and is a really positive, input into the economy as a whole, different ways of thinking and partnering with non-Māori. And so I think that, you saw that, for example, after the International Investment Summit this year, where iwi were present alongside big international investors. And out of that came a partnership between Brookfields, the big Canadian entity, and Waikato Tainui to co-invest in their logistics hub. And when you talk to the people from Brookfields about why did that make sense for you, it wasn't just about the business opportunity, it was also the shared sense of values about a long-term investment and contribution to community.
But that deal, the Brookfields deal, was well underway before the investment summit. That was purely Tainui searching for their own fortunes internationally.
Well, certainly Tainui themselves via Tuku have acknowledged that being at the summit was important for them in forging new connections and cementing existing relationships. And we've heard that feedback pretty consistently from iwi who were at the summit, that they want those international opportunities. And equally, international investors say that to us, that they find partnering with iwi is a great way to enter into a community and understand the social context in which they're seeking to run their business.
I actually talked to Tuku yesterday, and he said that he's actually seen the Prime Minister try and claim the Brookfields deal a number of times, and he just wanted to make a point that actually they had nothing to do with it. But
well, success has many fathers, as you well know. And look, I'm just glad to see that deal up and away, and I'd love to see more deals like that, where iwi have an idea, have capital to invest, there's a gap between their ambition and the capital they have, well, that's where an international partner can be instrumental. So if we can see more of that in the future, creating great Kiwi jobs, creating great Kiwi incomes, then that's a positive.
Just speaking on that relationship between government and iwi leaders there, I mean, what do you think the partnership looks like? Is it a partnership between, has the government got a role to partner with iwi?
Yeah, I think that we have a very important role as the Crown in engaging formally and informally with iwi leaders. And my experience of that has been that the approach that different iwi take will vary considerably depending on their stage in the Treaty of Waitangi process and their settlement journey, their outlook and the particular interests of their tribe. I think that it's a relationship that is forever because the Crown does not exist without iwi, and so it's one that we all as leaders need to nurture, not just for this present moment, but for the longer run. And I've found the conversations that I have with iwi leaders are often really constructive, but sometimes there's feedback as well. And I think that that's the way it should be. It should be a mature relationship in which we can be critiqued as government, but also have shared aspirations.
Are they critiquing you? What are they saying?
Well, look, I've actually had some really positive feedback about the aspirations that we have and what we are seeking to achieve with the economy. But equally, they will question where some things are going. So, a classic example of that two-sided thing is with the Resource Management Act. Now, that is an act that we see as a government has held back a lot of progress and development in New Zealand. Positive feedback from iwi is that there are around 15 iwi-led or iwi-partnered projects which have entered the fast-track process. The critique is that they are absolutely saying, well, as you reform that legislation, make sure the obligations that exist in our existing treaty settlements are upheld. That's absolutely critical. And so that consultation and engagement, I think, makes for better and more enduring law.
And their role as kaitiaki, because their role is in business is not at the behest of our environment, and they won't do anything that is going to be harmful to the environment. So, with the growth strategy, you've got Minister Shane Jones who's saying that Freddie the Frog is gone if he's going to impede a mining opportunity. That's not how iwi feel about whenua. So are you aligned?
Well, I think that iwi also want to see their whenua and their taonga being used to maximise benefits to their people. And as I say, look, the Fast Track Act is an example of that. So what that's about saying is there are projects that make use of New Zealand's resources that we want to see happen faster and not get caught up in environmental disputes in court. And actually there are ways of balancing our environmental interests and our economic growth interests. And as an endorsement of that, there are, as I say, more than a dozen iwi-led projects that have entered that process who clearly see that there's an opportunity for economic advancement while continuing to meet those obligations as kaitianga. So I think the two can coexist, and actually sometimes the rub that we get, I think about conversations I've had with Ngāi Tahu, is them saying, look, this conservation estate, we want to be able to make more of it. There are opportunities for our people if we're able to work in a better way with dogs. So I don't think the two necessarily contradict each other.
Te ariki nui koine ngā Waihonui Te Pō is hosting the Māori Economic Summit later this year, and I'm told top tier international investors are lining up to attend and possibly spend. One of the organisers, Tuku, that I spoke to yesterday, says Māori are holding their own economic summit because they can't rely on this government. It's a bit of a burn. Has he got a point?
I disagree with Tuku on that one, but I certainly hope that he invites me to the summit because I think it'll be a really great occasion. And I want to acknowledge the Māori Queen. I thought her message of saying let's focus on what we can build together as Māori is a really positive one, and certainly that's a kaupapa that the government wants to support.
If you went along, what could you add?
Well, I think I could listen, and that's often the biggest addition you can make as a leader, to listen to what it is that those there are aspiring to and what role they think the government can play in accelerating their aspirations and ambitions.
Just on, we were talking about being mothers before, and as mothers we know that the health of our families can be measured by the health of our children. So as the Finance Minister in charge of the big New Zealand family of 5-point-something million, when 24% of your Māori tamariki are living in material poverty, what are you doing wrong and what levers can you pull?
Well, I think whenever I think of children in poverty, I think about their parents, because ultimately no parent wants their child to be living in a situation where they don't materially have what they need. But we have to think about the different circumstances that have led them there. And one of the things that we know is heavily associated with material deprivation is people who are dependent on an unemployment benefit rather than having paid work. That's why our government is so focused on ensuring that there are supportive pathways out of welfare and into work.
You've got to have jobs. You've got to have jobs if you want people to come off benefits.
Yes, you do, and that's why we're focused on job creation. That's really significant. But we also know that even during times of very low unemployment, there have been families and communities that have persisted on welfare for long periods of time and who need more support to get off it. So that is one area that's really important. The second area is that sometimes when people aren't working, it's not through a lack of interest, but a lack of education. And so I maintain that one of the biggest things we can do in the medium term to ensure that more young people succeed is have a better education system that better equips young people. And certainly the investments we've made across our first two budgets have reflected that priority.
And again, that's the mainstream system that's failing Māori children. And I think I've actually asked this of Erica Stanford, Minister for Education, is that when you can see such success in a Māori model like wharekura and kura kaupapa, why would you not invest more in that?
And we are. And in this budget we invested specifically for new
there
learning
are families
spaces
waiting
in
for
kura kaupapa.
3 years to get their kids into kohanga reo. All around this country, it is a real crisis at the moment. You have all the levers and all the ability to make changes tomorrow by pouring more money into Māori education and early childhood rather than pulling money out of the Māori Development Fund at the budget.
Well, we are committed to kohanga reo, and in fact funding is available for every child who wishes to enrol in kohanga. The real barrier there is a lack of teachers who can teach in te reo Māori. And so that is an area that we have focused on in our recent budget. We, for example, invested money in upskilling teachers in the mainstream system to have better access to te reo Māori.
It's also buildings and it's also schools.
Which is why in the budget we invested specific funding in allowing for 50 new classrooms to be built across kura kaupapa, and why we're continuing to invest more in school property growth, because where schools are successful and they're in demand, we do want them to be able to grow, and we really support choice in the education system. Mainstream schools, charter schools, kura kaupapa all play a role in where families are able to match their values with the aspirations of their children in a school. We really want to see that partnership
You've just committed $500 million to schools, for rebuilds, infrastructure in schools. What have you got for kohanga reo?
Well, kohanga reo continue to access all of the subsidy programs that the government funds for early childhood education. And in our recent budget, we also made a specific investment in their data systems. And we're investing in the Family Boost program, which is available to all parents who enrol their kids in kohanga reo. So the way that we fund early childhood education across the board is that we provide funding on an hourly basis based on students' enrolments, and the centres make their own choices about property development.
E te minita tēnā rawa atu koe. Thank you for your time.
Kia ora.
I te whakarongo tātou ki te minita take ohanga kia Nicola Willis, ka nui te mihi ki te Māngai Pāho me irirangi te motu New Zealand on Air. Nā rawa tēnei kaupapa I taunaki. We'll be back with more mata ākua nei, nohoro mai.
Ko te reo, te take.